This is the dark story of a house that was never meant to end. San Jose, California, September 1906. Evening fog rolls in from the bay, thick and cold, swallowing the streets in gray silence. Somewhere in the distance, a lantern flickers. It moves slowly through a maze of corridors, left, then right, then up a staircase that stops at the ceiling. The woman holding it does not speak. She is thin, dressed in black, her face hidden beneath a veil. Her footsteps echo on polished hardwood, but the echo doesn't stop when she does. It lingers. It multiplies, as if the house itself is walking with her. This is Sarah Winchester, heiress to a fortune built on blood and gunpowder, widow of the man whose rifle won the West and filled 1,000 graves, and builder of the strangest mansion America has ever seen. Tonight, she walks through rooms that did not exist yesterday, past walls that were solid last week, down hallways that twist back on themselves like a fever dream. The house is always changing, always growing, and Sarah Winchester is always inside it, alone in the dark with the building tearing itself apart around her. No one knows why, but we do know this. It began with death. If you enjoy uncovering the hidden histories of Gilded Age estates, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which mansion to explore next. Your support allows me to keep creating these in-depth investigations. New Haven, Connecticut. William Wirt Winchester, her husband, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, dies of tuberculosis at 43. Sarah is 41. They had been married 20 years. Their only child, a daughter named Annie, died as an infant 15 years earlier. Now Sarah is alone and unimaginably wealthy. She inherits nearly $20 million. In today's money, that is close to $500 million. The fortune flows from a single source: the Winchester rifle, the gun that settlers carried west, the gun that soldiers fired in wars, the gun that, depending on who you ask, built an empire or broke a country in half. Sarah does not spend the money on jewels or travel or society parties. She buys a house. The truth was quieter and sadder. What most stories agree on is this: sometime after William's death, Sarah consulted a spiritual medium in Boston. The medium told her she was cursed, that the spirits of everyone killed by a Winchester rifle were haunting her family, that they had taken her husband, her child, and soon they would take her. Unless she moved west, unless she bought a house, and unless she built continuously without stopping for the rest of her life. The spirits, the medium said, would be confused by the construction, trapped in hallways that led nowhere, lost in rooms that appeared overnight. If she stopped building, she would die. Whether Sarah truly believed this, or whether grief had simply broken something inside her, we do not know. What is documented is simpler. In 1884, she boarded a train to California. She carried trunks filled with black dresses, a small staff, and enough money to reshape the world. She arrived in San Jose with no family, no husband, no child, just a plan. The house she bought was ordinary, a farmhouse, 8 rooms, modest, forgettable. Within a year, it was unrecognizable. Day crews hammered and sawed under the California sun. Night crews worked by lamplight, their shadows stretching across walls that hadn't existed at breakfast. Sarah hired carpenters, masons, plasterers, glaziers. She paid them well. She paid them on time. And she never, ever let them stop. Rooms sprouted like weeds. Staircases climbed to blank ceilings. Doors opened onto 15-foot drops into gardens below. Hallways doubled back, twisted, dead-ended. Windows were installed in floors. Chimneys stopped halfway to the roof. The neighbors whispered. The workers did not understand, but Sarah knew exactly what she was doing. She drew the plans herself, late at night, alone in a room she called the Seance Chamber. No architects, no consultants, just her, a pen, and whatever voices she heard in the silence. Each morning, She handed the drawings to the foreman. Each morning, the house grew stranger. By 1906, the mansion sprawled across 6 acres. It had grown from 8 rooms to over 100, and it showed no sign of stopping. This is where you have to go back. Back to the woman in the fog. Back to the lantern moving through impossible corridors. Back to Sarah Winchester walking her creation, checking every corner, every joint, every shadow. Because the house was not just a home. It was a shield, a trap, a prayer built in wood and glass. And Sarah believed, truly, desperately believed, that as long as the hammers kept swinging, as long as the saws kept singing, as long as the house kept growing, she would not die. What she didn't know was this: the house had other plans. The house had other plans. But to understand why Sarah Winchester believed she needed protection, you have to understand what she was protecting herself from. You have to go back further, back to a name that once meant power, precision, and death delivered at distance. Winchester, the rifle that won the West, the gun that changed warfare, the weapon that, in the right hands or the wrong ones, could end a life from 500 yards away. This was the empire Sarah inherited. And empires, even those built on innovation, are also built on graves. New Haven, Connecticut, 1866. Oliver Winchester stands in his factory, watching workers assemble the latest model. The Winchester model, 1866, sleek, reliable, deadly. It can fire 15 rounds without reloading, a marvel of engineering that makes every other rifle look like a relic. The demand is staggering. Settlers heading west want them for protection. The U.S. Army wants them for soldiers. Hunters want them for buffalo. And the Winchester Repeating Arms Company cannot manufacture them fast enough. Oliver Winchester is a businessman, not a gunsmith. Before rifles, he made shirts. But he understands markets. He understands scale. And he understands that in America, in this moment, there is no product more valuable than the ability to kill quickly and efficiently. By the time his son William marries Sarah Party in 1862, the Winchester fortune is already growing. By the time William inherits control of the company, it is unstoppable. The rifles flow out by the thousands. They cross prairies, mountains, battlefields. They appear in photographs of cowboys and soldiers, outlaws and lawmen. The Winchester becomes so iconic that it earns a nickname, the gun that won the West. But the West was not empty when it was won. What is known is this: the Winchester rifle was used in the Indian Wars, in conflicts that displaced entire nations, in hunts that drove the buffalo to near extinction, collapsing the food systems of indigenous peoples across the plains. It was used in range wars between cattlemen and homesteaders, in robberies, in murders, in suicides. No one kept count of how many people died by Winchester rifle. There was no registry, no ledger of souls. But by the time Sarah inherited the company's profits, the number was in the tens of thousands. Perhaps more? Some say she knew this. Some say it haunted her. Others insist she never thought about it at all, that the medium's warning was coincidence, that her guilt was invented by later storytellers looking for drama. We do not know. What remains undisputed are the facts. Sarah's daughter, Annie, died in 1866, just weeks after birth. A disease, likely marasmus, slow starvation despite being fed. The kind of loss that shatters a mother in ways that never fully heal. Then, 15 years later, William died. Tuberculosis consumed him slowly, methodically. Sarah watched him fade for months. After his death, she did not remarry. She did not return to society. She did not host parties, or attend galas, or do any of the things wealthy widows were expected to do. She disappeared, but she did not disappear into nothing. She disappeared into construction. By 1885, 1 year after arriving in San Jose, Sarah's modest farmhouse had become something else entirely. The original 8 rooms were buried beneath new wings, new floors, new additions. Workmen arrived at dawn and left at dusk, only to return the next morning to find their previous day's work already altered. A wall they had framed was now a doorway. A doorway they had hung now opened onto a closet. A closet had become a hallway. The hallway led to a staircase. The staircase climbed 7 steps and stopped at a ceiling. Nothing made sense. But Sarah paid in gold coins, delivered promptly every Saturday. The work was steady. The pay arrived on time, so the workers asked no questions. They simply built what she demanded, no matter how strange. And the house grew. 40 rooms, 60 rooms, 80 rooms. Turrets appeared overnight. Balconies jutted from upper floors at odd angles. A conservatory bloomed with imported plants. Stained glass windows, custom-made, expensive, were installed in interior walls where no sunlight would ever reach them. The mansion sprawled across acres now, a labyrinth of redwood and mahogany, skylights, and secret passages. Neighbors stopped asking questions. They simply stared. And Sarah kept building. This is where the whispers started. The workers began to notice things, small things at first. A door that wouldn't stay closed. A cold spot in a south-facing room that should have been warm. The sound of footsteps in empty hallways. Then stranger things. Tools went missing and reappeared in locked rooms. Hammers fell from workbenches with no one nearby. A carpenter swore he heard a woman weeping in the attic. But when he climbed up to check, he found nothing. Just wood and plaster. Just shadows and dust. Some workers quit. Others stayed but refused to work certain rooms. A few claimed they had seen figures moving past windows in wings that had no floors yet. Sarah said nothing about any of it. She simply handed out new plans each morning and watched the house grow taller, wider, deeper. By 1890, the Winchester Mystery House had become exactly that, a mystery. And Sarah Winchester had become a ghost in her own creation. Sarah Winchester had become a ghost in her own creation. But ghosts, at least, have the mercy of being simple. Sarah's house was anything but. By 1890, the mansion had consumed the original farmhouse entirely. What remained was a sprawling, twisted monument to obsession, a structure that defied every principle of architecture and common sense. 160 rooms and counting, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 40 staircases, 47 fireplaces, and not a single blueprint to explain any of it, because Sarah Winchester built from instinct, or inspiration, or something darker. Each night, she locked herself in the seance room, a small plain chamber in the center of the house. She sat alone until midnight, sometimes later, and when she emerged, she carried new drawings. Sketches of hallways that curved back on themselves, plans for staircases that rose 13 steps, then stopped, designs for doors that opened into walls or onto 15-foot drops with no balcony, no railing, just empty air and hard ground below. The workers built exactly what she specified. No questions asked. Walk through the Winchester house today, and you will feel it immediately. Wrongness, not danger exactly. Not threat, just wrongness, like a chord played slightly off-key. You enter through the front door, modest, unremarkable, and step into a hallway that should lead somewhere logical. Instead, it branches into 3 directions. One path climbs a staircase. Another descends into shadows. The third curves right and vanishes behind a corner. You choose the staircase. 7 steps up, you reach a landing. The stairs continue. 7 more steps, another landing, 7 more. And then, nothing. Just a ceiling, flat and close, blocking your way. You have climbed into a dead end. You turn back. You try the descending path. It leads to a door. You open it. Beyond is a closet, 1 inch deep. Just enough space for the door to swing inward. Nothing else. No shelves. No purpose. You try the third hallway. It twists left, then right, then left again, each turn tighter than the last. The walls press close. The ceiling lowers. You feel the air grow thinner, colder, and then the hallway ends at a window. Not a door, not a room, just a window, looking into another hallway, identical to the one you just left. You are lost. And you have been inside the house for less than 5 minutes. This was not accident. This was design. Sarah believed, or claimed to believe, that spirits moved in straight lines, that ghosts, once entering a space, would follow the most direct path. So she built curves, she built corners, she built hallways that doubled back, and staircases that led nowhere. She installed doors in floors, windows in ceilings, chimneys that stopped halfway up, secret passages hidden behind bookcases and panels. Some rooms had 13 hooks on the wall, 13 windows, 13 steps leading in. She was obsessed with the number, some say because it warded off evil, others because it invited it. But Sarah never explained. She simply built. The luxury was undeniable. Hand-carved woodwork from Austria, stained glass imported from Europe, Tiffany designs, custom-made, depicting spider webs and intricate flowers. Parquet floors in patterns so complex they seemed to shift as you walked across them. Gold and silver chandeliers, marble fireplaces, a ballroom with rare woods from 7 different countries. Every detail was exquisite. Every room was a masterpiece, and every masterpiece led to madness. A bathroom with a crystal door. Beautiful. But the door opened outward over a 2-story drop. 1 step through and you would fall. A staircase with risers only 2 inches high. 44 steps to climb 1 story, as if designed for someone who could barely lift their feet. A chimney built floor to ceiling in 1 room, elegant and grand. It connected to nothing. No fireplace below, no vent above, just decorative brickwork, expensive and utterly useless, craftsmanship and chaos. Woven together so tightly, you could not tell where one ended and the other began. The workers stopped asking why. They had learned, after years, that there was no why. There was only what Sarah wanted. And what Sarah wanted changed every single day. A foreman once asked her if she had a final plan, a vision of what the house would look like when it was finished. She looked at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "Finished?" she said quietly, and walked away. The hammering resumed the next morning. It would not stop for 38 years. But something else was happening, something the workers could feel but could not name. The house was no longer just growing. It was watching. The house was no longer just growing. It was watching. Or at least, that is what the workers began to believe. The mansion now sprawls across 4 stories in some places, 2 in others, with sections that seem to exist outside any logical floor plan. The construction crew has changed dozens of times. Some men quit, others are fired. A few simply stop showing up. But those who stay begin to notice patterns. The cold spots, for instance. Always in the same rooms. Always at the same time of day. A chill that settles over your shoulders like a hand, even in the California summer heat. The sounds. Footsteps on the floor above, except there is no floor above. Doors closing in empty wings. The faint murmur of conversation. 2 voices, maybe 3, that stops the moment you turn the corner. And the accidents. Not many. Not enough to shut down construction, but enough to make men nervous. A ladder collapsing beneath a worker who swears it was steady seconds before. A window shattering inward, spraying glass across a room where no one was standing. A carpenter who walked through a door he had used 100 times and suddenly found himself tumbling down a shaft that had not existed the day before. Sarah always paid for medical care. She always expressed concern. But, she never stopped building. The séance room was where it all began. Every night, without fail, Sarah climbed the stairs to the center of the house. The room was small, plain, no windows, no decoration, just 4 walls, a table, and a chair. She locked the door behind her. What happened inside, no one knew. The workers were forbidden from entering. The housekeeping staff was instructed to clean it only when Sarah was elsewhere, and even then they moved quickly, touching nothing they did not have to. Some claimed they heard her speaking when she was alone. Full conversations, as if someone else was in the room with her. Questions asked aloud, then long pauses, then responses to answers no one else could hear. Others said they heard music, a faint melody, like a music box winding down, drifting through the walls. One maid swore she heard weeping. But when asked, Sarah said nothing. She emerged each night near midnight, carrying new sketches, new plans. She handed them to the night foreman and returned to her bedroom. The next morning, construction resumed. Always new, always strange, always exactly what she had drawn. Marian Merriman was the only person who got close. She arrived in 1886 as Sarah's personal secretary and companion. Young, educated, loyal. She managed Sarah's correspondence, her finances, her appointments. She was one of the few people Sarah spoke to regularly, and she never spoke about what she saw, not publicly, not in letters, not even, as far as records show, in private diaries. But workers noticed that Marian moved through the house differently than others. She knew which hallways led somewhere and which were traps. She knew which doors opened and which were painted onto walls. She navigated the maze as if she had a map no one else could see. Some said Sarah trusted her with secrets. Others said Marian was the only one Sarah feared might leave. And so she kept her close, kept her paid, kept her silent. What is documented is this: Marian stayed for decades, through every addition, every renovation, every strange turn the house took. She remained until Sarah's death. And when reporters came asking questions after Sarah was gone, Marian said only this: she was a kind woman, a lonely woman, and she believed what she was doing mattered. Then she closed the door. But kindness does not explain the iron bars. In 1894, Sarah ordered the installation of heavy iron bars across certain windows. Not all windows, just specific ones, scattered throughout the house in no discernible pattern. The bars were ornate, expensive, custom forged, but they were also functional, strong, permanent. When a worker asked why, Sarah did not answer. The bars went up. Then she ordered more construction. A new wing, a new tower, a new hallway that spiraled inward like a snail shell, tighter and tighter, until it ended in a room barely large enough to stand in. No furniture, no windows, just walls pressing close on all sides. She had the door locked from the outside. By 1895, the Winchester mansion was no longer just a curiosity. It was a legend. Neighbors told stories about the widow who built day and night. Travelers passing through San Jose asked to see the house. Journalists wrote breathless articles describing the strangest home in America. Some called it genius. Others called it madness. Sarah called it nothing at all. She simply kept building. And the house, sprawling, twisting, alive with hammers and saws and whispers, kept growing. But in 1906, something happened that even Sarah could not plan for. Something that would crack the house open and reveal what lay inside. Something happened that even Sarah could not plan for. April the 18th, 1906, 5:12 a.m. The earthquake begins 40 miles north, deep beneath the San Andreas Fault. The ground splits, the earth roars, and the shockwave rolls south toward San Jose like a freight train made of stone. Sarah Winchester is asleep in her bedroom, one of several she rotates through, never using the same one 2 nights in a row. Then the house begins to move, not gently, not slowly. The mansion lurches sideways, wood shrieking against nails, glass exploding from frames. Chandeliers swing like pendulums, smashing into walls. Floors buckle, ceilings crack, and rain plaster dust thick as snow. Sarah wakes to the sound of her house tearing itself apart. She tries to stand. The floor drops 6 inches, then snaps back. She's thrown against the wall. Pictures crash down around her. A mirror shatters, shards spinning through the air like knives. The roaring does not stop. It builds, louder, deeper, as if the earth itself is screaming. The walls around her twist, door frames bending into parallelograms. She can hear wood splintering in distant rooms, entire sections of the house collapsing inward. She crawls toward the door. It will not open. The frame has warped, jamming it shut. She pulls harder, panic rising in her throat. The house shudders again, and somewhere above her, something enormous crashes down. A chimney maybe, or a tower. The sound like thunder compressed into a single deafening crack. Sarah is 76 years old, and she is trapped. The shaking lasts 45 seconds, but those 45 seconds rewrite the mansion's geometry. When the dust settles, when the groaning stops, when Sarah finally forces the door open and stumbles into the hallway, she sees devastation. The grand 7-story tower, the tallest part of the house visible from San Jose's streets, has collapsed. 3 floors pancaked down into rubble. The top section is gone entirely, reduced to beams and shingles scattered across the lawn. Entire wings have shifted off their foundations. Walls lean at angles that should be impossible. Staircases that once climbed now tilt sideways, steps spilling like broken teeth. And everywhere there is dust. Thick and choking, it fills the air, coats every surface, turns the morning light gray. Sarah walks through the wreckage, silent. Her face is pale, her hands tremble, but she does not cry. She does not speak, and she simply walks, room after room, surveying what the earthquake has done. The workers arrive by mid-morning. They expect to find her distraught, possibly injured, perhaps ready finally to abandon the project. Instead, they find her standing in the ruins of the tower, holding a piece of paper, new plans, not to demolish, not to repair what was broken, to rebuild, to expand, to continue. One worker, a foreman who had been with her for nearly a decade, found the courage to ask, "Mrs. Winchester, perhaps this is a sign? Perhaps it's time to—" She looked at him, just looked. He did not finish the sentence, but Sarah did make one change. She ordered the ruined tower sealed, not rebuilt, not removed, just sealed, boarded up, locked, forbidden. No one was to enter it. No one was to speak of it. The workers obeyed. They also obeyed when she ordered construction to resume the very next day. Hammers rang out across the property before the aftershocks had even stopped. Crews cleared rubble and framed new walls simultaneously. Within a week, the sound of saws filled the air again. Within a month, new rooms appeared. The house, which had been wounded, began to heal. But it healed wrong. Crooked, scarred, stranger than before. Doorways no longer aligned with their frames. Floors sloped at subtle angles that made you dizzy if you stood too long. Windows cracked during the quake were left cracked, spider-webbed glass still in place, refracting light into fractured rainbows. And Sarah moved through it all like a sleepwalker, directing, adjusting, building. The neighbors said the earthquake had broken something in her. The workers said she had been broken long before. But Marion Merriman, who found Sarah that morning still trapped in her bedroom, who helped pull her from the rubble, who saw the look on her face when she stepped into the ruins, Marion said something different years later. She said Sarah had seemed almost relieved, as if the earthquake had proven something, confirmed something, as if the house collapsing and Sarah surviving meant the building was working, that the spirits had been confused just long enough, that she had bought herself more time. And so the construction continued, faster now, more urgent, as if Sarah knew something the rest of them didn't, as if the clock, invisible and relentless, was running out, as if the clock, invisible and relentless, was running out. But for Sarah Winchester, time moved differently than it did for everyone else. 1907. The earthquake is a year behind her. The mansion has grown past the ruins, swallowing the damage beneath new construction. 160 rooms now. Perhaps more. No one counts anymore. The house shifts too often for any number to stay accurate. And Sarah, at 77, shows no sign of slowing. She wakes before dawn. She walks the halls, checking joints and corners, running her fingers along baseboards, testing doors. She speaks to no one, eats little, sleeps in scattered intervals across different bedrooms, moving each night as if being hunted. The workers arrive at 6 a.m. She is already waiting with new plans. There was a rhythm to it now, a terrible, mechanical rhythm. Morning crews worked the exterior, framing new wings, raising walls, installing windows. Afternoon crews worked the interior, laying floors, hanging doors, carving trim. Night crews worked by lamplight, their shadows stretching long across rooms that had not existed at breakfast. And Sarah moved between them like a conductor, silent and precise. She did not socialize, did not attend church or town functions, did not invite guests or host dinners. The only people who entered the house were workers, staff, and Marion. Everyone else stayed outside the gates, but that did not stop the stories. San Jose had grown around the mansion like a city around a wound. By 1910, the town had become a destination, partly because of her. Tourists came to glimpse the mysterious widow and her impossible house. They lined the streets, craning their necks to see over the high fences Sarah had erected. Some claimed they saw her at windows, always alone, always watching. Others swore they heard music at night, not phonograph recordings, not a radio. Live music, as if an orchestra played in empty rooms. A reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle managed to get close enough to interview a former worker. The man who requested anonymity said this: "She believes she's keeping them out, the spirits. She thinks as long as the house keeps changing, they can't find her, can't settle, can't reach her. So, she builds, not because she wants to, because she has to." When asked if he believed in ghosts, the man paused. "I believe she does," he said. "And when you're inside that house, when you're walking those halls, you start to wonder." But there were moments, rare, brief, when Sarah seemed almost human. She was generous with her workers, paid them well above standard wages, provided medical care if they were injured, gave bonuses at Christmas. She funded local charities quietly, anonymously, donated to orphanages, hospitals, schools, thousands of dollars, given without fanfare or recognition. Marion once mentioned to a staff member that Sarah had a gentle side, that she loved flowers, spent hours in the conservatory among the ferns and orchids, that she played piano beautifully when she thought no one was listening, that she was, underneath the obsession, still a woman who had lost everything. A woman trying, in the only way she knew how, to survive. But survival came at a cost. 1912. The house was everywhere now. It dominated her life, her thoughts, her every waking moment. She could not leave it for more than a few hours without feeling pulled back, could not sleep soundly without waking to sketch new additions. Her health declined slowly. Arthritis twisted her hands. Her hearing faded. She walked with a cane, though she refused help navigating the maze she had created. And still, she built. The house grew stranger. A staircase installed upside down, risers descending from ceiling to floor. A room with 4 doors, 1 to enter, 3 that opened onto walls. A window set into the floor of a second-story hallway, looking down into a storage closet. Beauty and madness, inseparable now. The mansion was a masterpiece. The mansion was a nightmare. And Sarah was both its prisoner and its queen. Marion worried. She had watched Sarah age, watched the obsession deepen. She had tried gently to suggest rest, a break. A pause? Sarah refused. "If I stop," she said once quietly, "I die." Marion did not ask what she meant. She already knew. By 1920, Sarah Winchester was 90 years old. The house was a labyrinth of over 160 rooms, spanning 6 acres, with sections that defied mapping, staircases that led nowhere, doors that opened into voids, hallways that curved back on themselves like Mobius strips. It was the most famous house in California, and the loneliest. Sarah walked its corridors alone, her cane tapping against wood, echoing through chambers no one else entered. She gave orders from behind closed doors. She ate meals in silence. She slept, when she slept, in beds that changed nightly. The workers hammered on. The house grew, but the human body, unlike wood and stone, can't be endlessly rebuilt. And in 1922, the clock Sarah had been running from finally caught up. And in 1922, the clock Sarah had been running from finally caught up. September 4th. Evening. Sarah Winchester sits in her bedroom, the one she has used for the past 3 nights, a small chamber on the 2nd floor with a view of the gardens. She is 82 years old. Her hands, gnarled by arthritis, rest in her lap. Her breathing is shallow, labored. Marion sits beside her. Outside, the hammers continue. They have not stopped in 38 years. The rhythm is as constant as a heartbeat. Tap, 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 echoing through the halls, shaking dust from rafters. Sarah listens to them, eyes half closed. She has not given new plans in 3 days. The workers are finishing older projects, installing trim, painting walls. But they sense something has changed. The foreman walks the grounds nervously, glancing at the windows, waiting for instructions that do not come. Inside, Sarah's breath grows quieter. She dies at 10:45 p.m. Heart failure, the doctor writes. Natural causes given her age. Marion is holding her hand when it happens. She feels the fingers go slack, the faint pulse fade. She sits in silence for several minutes, tears sliding down her face. Then she stands. She walks to the window and looks out over the mansion, the sprawling, twisted monument Sarah spent 4 decades building. And she realizes the hammers have stopped, not gradually, not winding down, just stopped, as if the house itself knows. The workers find out the next morning. The foreman gathers them at dawn, his face pale. Mrs. Winchester passed last night, he says quietly. There will be no more construction. Some men remove their hats. Others stand in stunned silence. One carpenter who has worked on the property for 15 years looks up at the mansion and whispers, "It's not finished." "No," the foreman says, "it's not. And it never will be." The funeral is small, private. Sarah is buried beside her husband William and their daughter Annie in New Haven, Connecticut. 3 graves in a row. The family reunited at last. Marion attends, along with a handful of staff and distant relatives. No speeches, no grand eulogies. Just a quiet ceremony for a woman who spent most of her life avoiding being seen. But in San Jose, the mansion draws crowds. Within days of Sarah's death, hundreds of people gather outside the gates. They peer through the iron bars, trying to glimpse the house that was never finished. Reporters arrive, cameras in hand, writing sensational headlines. Mystery mansion owner dies. House left incomplete. Widow's 38-year building spree ends in death. The stories multiply, the legends grow. And the truth, as always, becomes harder to find. What the heirs found was staggering. Sarah's niece, Frances Marriott, inherited the property. She arrived with lawyers and accountants to survey the estate and assess its value. They entered the mansion with notebooks and measuring tapes. They did not emerge for hours. When they did, they looked shaken. "How many rooms?" one lawyer asked the foreman. "We don't know," he admitted. "She kept changing things. We stopped counting years ago." The lawyer stared at him. "You stopped counting?" "Yes, sir." The team spent weeks mapping the interior. They found rooms that had been sealed for decades. Staircases hidden behind false walls. Entire wings that did not appear on any worker's memory. They found Sarah's seance room, untouched since her death. A table, a chair, a single candle burned down to a nub. They found cabinets filled with expensive dishes, never used, still wrapped in paper. They found closets stacked with bolts of fabric, enough to furnish 10 homes. They found a bell system with buttons in every room, designed to summon servants. But many of the buttons connected to nothing. Wires that led into walls and stopped. Bells that could never ring. And they found something else. In a locked room on the 3rd floor, they discovered plans. Dozens of sketches, hundreds of drawings, rolled and stacked and crammed into drawers. Designs for wings that were never built. Towers that were never raised. Rooms that existed only on paper. Sarah had been planning ahead. Years ahead. Decades, perhaps. As if she truly believed she would live forever, as long as the building continued. One drawing showed a massive ballroom, twice the size of the existing one, with a domed ceiling and windows on all sides. Another depicted a tower 10 stories tall, spiraling upward like a lighthouse. A third sketched out an underground network of tunnels connecting every major room, allowing movement through the house without ever being seen. None of it was built. None of it would ever be built. The hammers had stopped. Francis Marriott made a decision quickly. The house would be sold. Auctioned off, along with its contents. The land, the furniture, the strange and beautiful and broken mansion, all of it would go to the highest bidder. In February 1923, the estate held a public auction. Thousands attended. They walked through the halls Sarah had walked, opened doors she had locked, stood in rooms she had built and abandoned, and they whispered about the staircases to nowhere, the doors and floors, the windows facing walls, about the widow who built for 38 years and never stopped, about whether she was mad or brilliant, or something else entirely. The house sold for $135,000, a fraction of what Sarah had spent building it, but the buyer had plans. Plans that would turn Sarah's private obsession into America's most famous haunted mansion. Plans that would turn Sarah's private obsession into America's most famous haunted mansion. The buyer was John H. Brown, a local investor with an eye for opportunity. He did not purchase the Winchester mansion because he believed in ghosts. He purchased it because he believed in profit. And in 1923, in the age of Houdini and spiritualism, of seances and parlors and mediums on stages, a genuine mystery house was worth more than gold. It was worth spectacle. Brown spent months preparing. He hired staff to clean decades of dust from the rooms. He brought in photographers to document the strangest features, the staircases to nowhere, the doors opening onto walls, the upside-down columns and spiderweb windows. And he crafted a story. Not Sarah's story exactly. Something bigger, darker, more theatrical. He called it the Winchester Mystery House, most haunted mansion in America. The first public tour opened in 1923, just months after Sarah's death. Tickets sold out immediately. Visitors arrived by the hundreds, eager to walk the halls they had only glimpsed through iron gates. They paid 50 cents each, a significant sum, and were led through the labyrinth in guided groups. The tour guides had been carefully trained. They knew which details to emphasize, which stories to tell, which rooms created the most dramatic effect. They led guests up the staircase that climbed into a ceiling. They opened the door that revealed a 15-foot drop. They pointed out the seance room, describing, sometimes accurately, often not, the midnight rituals Sarah supposedly performed. And they told the story Brown wanted told, that Sarah Winchester was a widow driven mad by guilt, that she believed the ghosts of everyone killed by Winchester rifles were hunting her, that she built the house to confuse them, trap them, keep them at bay, that she died still building, still running, still haunted. The visitors believed every word, but not everyone was comfortable with the spectacle. Marion Merriman, who had stayed in San Jose after Sarah's death, refused to participate. She declined interviews, turned away reporters, watched from a distance as the house she had known intimately became a carnival attraction. A journalist cornered her outside a market in 1924. "Miss Merriman, they say the house is cursed." That Mrs. Winchester heard voices. that spirits walked the halls. Can you confirm any of this? Marion looked at him for a long moment. I can confirm, she said slowly, that Mrs. Winchester was a woman of great conviction, that she was kind to those who worked for her, that she loved beauty and craftsmanship, and that she deserves more respect than your headlines will ever give her. She walked away. The journalist published the quote, but buried it on page 6. The headline read, "Former companion refuses to deny ghost stories." The tours continued, and the stories grew. Guides began inventing details that had no basis in fact. They claimed Sarah held seances every night. True, but added that she communed with specific spirits, that she heard names, received instructions from the dead. They said certain rooms were more haunted than others, that cold spots appeared without explanation, that doors slammed shut on their own. Some of this was exaggeration, some of it was not, because the tourists began reporting things. A woman in 1925 swore she felt a hand on her shoulder in the seance room, but when she turned, no one was there. A man claimed he heard footsteps following him through the hallway, always 2 steps behind, stopping when he stopped. A child told her mother she saw a lady in black standing at the top of a staircase. When the mother looked, the staircase was empty. The staff dismissed most of it as imagination. Overactive minds primed by the stories they had just heard. But even the skeptics admitted, the house felt wrong. Not dangerous, not evil, just wrong, in ways they could not articulate, as if the geometry itself was slightly off, as if the walls were watching. By 1930, the Winchester Mystery House was a California landmark. Postcards featured its most famous oddities. Travel guides listed it as a must-see attraction. Newspapers ran features speculating about Sarah's mental state, her beliefs, her reasons. Psychologists wrote papers analyzing her obsession. Architects studied the construction, baffled by the lack of coherent design. Spiritualists claimed the house was a genuine portal, a thin place where the living and dead could meet. And through it all, the mansion stood, silent, sprawling, strange. Its 160 rooms open to the public, its staircases leading nowhere, waiting for feet that would never climb them. Its doors opening onto voids, revealing nothing. John H. Brown made a fortune, but he never spent a night inside the house. When asked why, he laughed. "I'm a businessman, not a fool." A reporter pressed, "So, you do believe it's haunted?" Brown's smile faded. "I believe some places hold on to things, memories, emotions, whatever you want to call it. And this place? This place held on to Sarah Winchester for 38 years. He paused. "I don't think it's let her go." The tours continued today. Thousands visit every year, walking the same halls Sarah walked, searching for the same answers she never found. But the question remains, what were they really looking for? And what, if anything, did Sarah Winchester actually hear in the silence? And what, if anything, did Sarah Winchester actually hear in the silence? To answer that, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the medium in Boston, back to the moment Sarah was told she was cursed. 1881. A parlor draped in velvet, candles flickering, a woman across the table, eyes closed, claiming to speak for the dead. "The spirits are restless," the medium says. "They seek you. They blame you. The blood of thousands stains your family's hands." Sarah listens, grief-stricken, desperate. "What can I do?" she asks. "Build," the medium answers. "Build and never stop. Confuse them, trap them, keep moving, and they cannot reach you." But here is what we know now, what history reveals when you look past the legend. There is no record of this seance, no documentation, no name attached to the medium. No witness beyond the stories repeated after Sarah's death. It might have happened, or it might be something else entirely, because Sarah Winchester was not uneducated, not irrational, not a woman easily fooled. Before her husband died, She was known in New Haven society as intelligent, well-read, cultured. She spoke 4 languages. She played piano beautifully. She managed household finances with precision. After William's death, she inherited not just money but responsibility. She oversaw investments, made financial decisions, handled legal matters. She was, by all accounts, competent. So why the house? Why the obsession? The easy answer is, grief broke her. Madness took hold. She believed in ghosts, but the truth is quieter and more complicated. Consider this. Sarah lost her only child at 6 weeks old, a daughter. Annie Party Winchester. The grief was devastating. Absolute. The kind that rewrites a person from the inside. 15 years later, she lost her husband, the man she had married at 22, the man she had loved for 2 decades. Now she was alone, 41 years old, childless, widowed, wealthy beyond measure, but with no one to share it with, no family left in New Haven who understood her, no children to build a future for, no husband to grow old beside, just money and emptiness. What if the house was not about ghosts at all? What if it was about purpose? Think about it. Sarah could have lived anywhere, traveled the world, built a single beautiful mansion, and filled it with servants and luxury. Instead, she chose construction. Endless, relentless construction. She woke every morning with something to do, plans to draw, workers to direct, decisions to make, problems to solve. The house gave her a reason to get out of bed. It gave her control in a life where she had lost everything she could not control. Her child's health, her husband's illness, the passage of time. She could not bring them back, but she could build. And building meant she was still here, still doing something, still mattering. And perhaps there were ghosts, but not the kind the stories describe. Not the vengeful spirits of rifle victims, not supernatural forces hunting her through hallways, just the ghosts every grieving person carries, memory, regret, love that has nowhere left to go. Sarah built rooms for the daughter who never grew up, for the husband who never came home, for the life she thought she would have and didn't. Every staircase was a path forward she never took. Every door that opened onto nothing was a future that closed. Every window looking inward instead of outward was a reminder that she was trapped, not by spirits, but by loss. The house was her grief made physical, and building it was the only way she knew how to survive. Marion understood this, perhaps better than anyone. Years after Sarah's death, she gave one final interview to a trusted friend, not for publication, just for the record. She said, "People think she was mad. They think she heard voices, saw ghosts, lived in terror. But I was there. I saw her every day. And what I saw was a woman who was desperately, achingly lonely, who had lost everyone she loved, and who found in that house a way to keep living." The friend asked, did she believe in the spirits? Marion paused. I think she believed in something. Whether it was ghosts or God or just the need to keep her hands busy, I don't know. But I know she wasn't mad. She was sad. There's a difference. The seance room, then, was not a place of terror. It was a place of conversation, where Sarah spoke to the people she had lost, not through mediums, but through memory, where she asked questions and answered them herself, because there was no one left to answer, where she sat alone in the dark and tried to make sense of a world that had taken everything. And when she emerged with new plans, it was not because spirits had commanded her. It was because building was the only prayer she knew how to say. This does not make the house less strange. It does not explain every oddity, every staircase to nowhere, every door that opens onto walls. But it does change the question. Not, why did she build to escape ghosts, but why did she build a labyrinth to hold her grief? But why did she build a labyrinth to hold her grief? Because grief, unlike other emotions, has no straight path, no clear direction, no exit. It circles back on itself. It leads you somewhere you thought you understood, then reveals you were wrong. It opens doors that should lead forward, but instead show you the same room you were in yesterday, last month, 10 years ago. Grief is a maze, and Sarah Winchester built hers in wood and glass and stone. Walk through the mansion today, and you will see it clearly. The staircases that climb 7 steps and stop, moments of hope that lead nowhere. The effort to rise, to ascend, to move beyond, only to hit a ceiling and realize you cannot. The doors that open onto walls, futures that seemed possible, paths that should have existed. But when you reach for them, there is only blankness. Only the realization that what you wanted is impossible. The hallways that curve back on themselves, the way grief returns you to the same pain, the same memory, the same loss, no matter how far you think you've walked. The windows that face inward instead of outward, the way mourning turns you inward, makes you look at your own reflection instead of the world beyond. Every architectural oddity is a metaphor. Every strange choice is a feeling made physical. The house was not designed to confuse spirits. It was designed to contain the unconfinable, the endless, twisting, recursive nature of profound loss. But there was also beauty in it, because Sarah did not build carelessly, did not throw rooms together in haphazard panic. She built with precision, with artistry, with love. The Tiffany windows, expensive, intricate, depicting spider webs and flowers, were not chosen randomly. Spider webs are fragile yet strong, breaking easily but rebuilding overnight, a perfect symbol for resilience. The parquet floors, with patterns so complex they seem to shift, were works of art. Each piece of wood carefully selected, cut, fitted. Hours of labor for something most people would walk across without noticing. The ballroom, with its rare hardwoods from 7 countries, was a space of elegance and grace. A room designed for joy, even though no parties were ever held there. Sarah was building something beautiful out of her pain. She was taking the chaos inside her and giving it form, structure, meaning. Consider the number 13. Sarah used it obsessively. 13 hooks, 13 windows, 13 steps. Some say it was superstition. Others say it warded off evil. But 13 is also the number of lunar cycles in a year, the number associated with transformation, with death and rebirth. In some cultures, 13 is sacred, a number of completion, not bad luck. Perhaps Sarah saw it differently than the rest of the world. Perhaps for her, 13 was not about fear. It was about cycles, about time passing, about the fact that life ends and begins again, even when you cannot see how. And the cold spots the workers reported? The footsteps in empty rooms? The doors that slammed on their own? Old houses settle. Wood expands and contracts. Temperature changes create drafts. Or perhaps Sarah's presence was so strong, her emotions so intense, that they soaked into the walls, not as literal ghosts, but as something quieter, an atmosphere, a feeling, a sense that someone loved this place desperately. That someone poured their entire life into these rooms. And that kind of devotion leaves traces. But here is the hardest truth. The house did not save her. Building did not bring back her daughter, did not resurrect her husband, did not heal the wounds or fill the emptiness. She built for 38 years, and she still died alone. The hammers stopped, the construction ended, and Sarah was buried 3,000 miles away, beside the people she had lost. The house remained, unfinished, unexplained, a monument to a grief that outlasted the woman who carried it. Yet there is something profound in that, because Sarah did not give up, did not surrender to despair, did not let the loss consume her entirely. She built. Every day, despite the pain, despite the loneliness, despite the impossibility of ever filling the void, she built. She created something strange, yes, Something broken, perhaps, but something undeniably hers. And maybe that is the real legacy of the Winchester Mystery House. Not a haunted mansion, not a widow's madness, but a testament to the human need to create meaning from loss, to build something, anything, in the face of unbearable absence, to keep moving forward, even when every path leads nowhere. The house still stands, and every year, thousands walk its halls, searching for ghosts. But what they find, whether they know it or not, is something more human. They find grief, and they find what one woman did with hers, and they find what one woman did with hers. But Sarah Winchester did not build alone. For 38 years, workers arrived at dawn and left at dusk. Carpenters, masons, glaziers, painters, men who measured and cut and hammered and fitted, men who followed plans they did not understand, building a house that made no sense. And yet, many of them stayed. Not all. The turnover was constant. Some left after days, others after weeks, unable to tolerate the strangeness or the isolation. But a core group remained, year after year, decade after decade. They became part of the house's story, though history rarely remembers their names. There was John Hanson, the head carpenter. He arrived in 1885, 23 years old, and worked on the mansion until Sarah's death, 37 years. Most of his adult life spent building rooms that led nowhere, staircases that stopped at ceilings. When asked why he stayed, he gave a simple answer. The work was good, the pay was fair, and Mrs. Winchester never asked more of us than she asked of herself. He remembered her differently than the legends suggest, not as a mad woman wandering halls in terror, but as an exacting employer who knew what she wanted and expected precision, who walked the construction sites daily, checking joints and corners, running her hands along surfaces to feel for imperfections. She cared about quality, he said. Every board mattered, every nail. She built like someone who believed the house would last forever. And in a way, she was right. Then there was George Connor, the night foreman. He supervised the crews that worked after dark, installing fixtures and trim by lamplight. He saw the house in its strangest hours, shadows stretching long, wind-rattling windows, the structure creaking and settling around them. He admitted years later that it unsettled him. You'd hear things, he said. Footsteps when everyone was accounted for, doors closing in locked wings. Once, I swear I heard music, a piano, somewhere deep in the house. But when we checked, there was no one. But he also said this. I never felt threatened. Uneasy, yes, but not unsafe. Whatever was in that house, it wasn't malicious. It was just there. He stayed for 15 years, and of course there was Marian Merriman. She was not a worker in the traditional sense. She was Sarah's companion, her secretary, her confidant, the only person who saw Sarah not as an employer or a curiosity, but as a woman. Marian managed the household, handled correspondence, accompanied Sarah on the rare occasions she left the property. She navigated the labyrinth as easily as Sarah did, knew which doors led somewhere and which were traps. But more than that, she understood. She understood that Sarah was not building to confuse ghosts. She was building to survive grief, to create purpose where there was none, to fill the silence with something other than loss. Marian never married, never had children. She devoted her life to Sarah Winchester, and when Sarah died, something in Marian died too. She lived quietly in San Jose until her own death in 1938, 16 years after Sarah's. She rarely spoke about the house, rarely gave interviews, but those who knew her said she carried a sadness, as if she had left part of herself in those halls and could never get it back. These people, John, George, Marian, and dozens of others whose names are lost, were the house's true witnesses. They saw Sarah not as legend, but as a person, flawed, obsessed, lonely, but also kind, generous, determined. They knew the truth behind the stories, that the staircases leading nowhere, were architectural experiments, built and abandoned when Sarah changed her mind. That the doors opening onto walls were the result of constant renovation. A hallway removed, a room relocated, but the door left in place. That the cold spots and strange sounds were drafts and settling wood, amplified by imagination and exhaustion. But they also knew something the skeptics did not, that even if there were no ghosts, the house was still haunted. Haunted by Sarah's loneliness. By her need to keep building, because stopping meant confronting what she had lost. By the absence of the family she should have had, the life she should have lived. When Sarah died, many of the workers attended the funeral. They stood in the back, hats in hands, silent. They had spent years building something they did not understand. But they understood this. Sarah Winchester had given them work, treated them fairly, and asked only that they help her build something impossible. And they had. John Hanson returned to the mansion one final time in 1923 after it opened to the public. He walked the halls he had helped construct, climbed the staircases he had framed, opened the doors he had hung. A tour guide asked if he wanted to hear the ghost stories. He shook his head. "I know the real story," he said quietly, and walked away. The workers moved on, but the house remained, holding their labor, their years, their shared witness to one woman's relentless grief. And in the rooms they built, something lingered, not spirits, but memory. The memory of what it means to keep going, even when the path leads nowhere. The memory of what it means to keep going, even when the path leads nowhere. But memory is fragile. It bends. It changes. And the moment Sarah Winchester died, her story began to slip away from truth. The newspapers got to it first. Within days of her death, headlines screamed across California and beyond. Eccentric widow dies in mystery mansion. Woman who built to escape ghosts. Finally succumbs. The mad heiress and her house of spirits. The articles were breathless, sensational, filled with half-truths and inventions. They described Sarah as a recluse who never left her property. False. As a woman who wore only black and spoke to no one. Exaggerated. As someone who heard voices and saw apparitions. Unverified. But truth did not sell newspapers. Mystery did. And the Winchester Mystery House, as it was now being called, was the perfect mystery. The stories multiplied. Some said Sarah slept in a different bedroom every night to confuse the spirits tracking her. True, but likely for practical reasons. The house was under constant construction. Rooms were dusty, noisy, unfinished. Moving around made sense. Some said she fired workers who looked her in the eye or spoke without being addressed. False. Workers who stayed for decades remembered her as demanding, but respectful, quiet, but not cruel. Some said she conducted elaborate seances, communicating with the dead, receiving architectural instructions from beyond. Partially true. She did spend time alone in the seance room, but whether she truly believed she was speaking to spirits or simply found solace in the ritual, no one knows. The legends grew more elaborate with each retelling. By the 1930s, the house had become a symbol, not of grief, but of madness. Not of resilience, but of obsession. Psychologists wrote case studies without ever having met Sarah, diagnosing her with everything from schizophrenia to severe depression. Spiritualists claimed the house was genuinely haunted, a thin place where the veil between worlds was particularly weak. Architects studied it as a cautionary tale about building without plan or purpose. Everyone had a theory. Everyone knew what the house meant, except no one had asked Sarah, and Sarah, of course, could not answer. She left no diary, no memoir, no letters explaining her choices. The plans she drew were functional, not philosophical. They showed dimensions and materials, not motivations. Marion knew more than anyone, but she refused to sensationalize. And when she died in 1938, Sarah's interior life died with her. What remained were the facts. Sarah Winchester inherited a fortune. She moved to California. She bought a house and expanded it continuously for 38 years. She employed hundreds of workers. She treated them fairly. She lived quietly, generously, and alone. And she died leaving a mansion that defied explanation. Everything else, the ghosts, the curses, the madness, was interpretation. Stories we told because the truth was too simple, too sad, too human. But stories have power, even false ones. The Winchester Mystery House became famous not because of what it was, but because of what people believed it was. A haunted mansion, a monument to guilt, a labyrinth designed to trap vengeful spirits. And in believing these things, millions of people came. They walked the halls Sarah walked, climbed the stairs she climbed, stood in rooms where she once stood alone in the dark, trying to make sense of her life. Some came for thrills, some came for history, some came searching for ghosts. But all of them, whether they realized it or not, came searching for meaning. They wanted to understand why someone would build something so strange, why someone would devote nearly 4 decades to a project with no end. They wanted answers. And the house, silent and sprawling, gave them none. It simply stood. Strange and beautiful, broken and whole, a puzzle with pieces that did not fit, which, perhaps, was Sarah's greatest creation. Not a house designed to confuse ghosts, but a house that reflected the human condition, fractured, searching, building meaning from chaos. A house that asked questions instead of answering them. A house that refused to be understood. The tour guides learned quickly what sold tickets, not the truth about Sarah's grief, not the complexity of her choices, but the ghost stories, the dramatic tales, the suggestion that something supernatural lingered in those halls. So they leaned into it. They pointed out cold spots and claimed spirits caused them. They mentioned the seance room and implied Sarah contacted specific ghosts. They told stories of doors slamming and footsteps echoing and visitors feeling watched. Some of it was true, some of it was embellished, some of it was pure invention. But it worked. The house became one of the most famous haunted locations in America. And Sarah Winchester became, in death, more famous than she ever was in life. The stories continue, and the house, misunderstood and mythologized, stands witness. But beneath the legends, the truth remains. Sarah Winchester built because she had to, and we tell stories about her for the same reason. And we tell stories about her for the same reason. Because stories are how we make sense of things we cannot explain. How we turn confusion into narrative, chaos into meaning. And the Winchester Mystery House even today resists explanation. Modern visitors walk its halls with cameras and voice recorders, searching for evidence of the paranormal. They stand in the seance room, waiting for cold spots. They climb the staircase to nowhere, hoping to feel something, a presence, a chill, a sense that they are not alone. Some report experiences they cannot explain. A woman in 2015 claimed her camera malfunctioned in 3 different rooms, then worked perfectly once she left the house. A man swore he heard his name whispered in an empty hallway, though no one else heard it. A child told her parents she saw a lady in old-fashioned clothes standing by a window, but when they looked, no one was there. Are these stories true? Exaggerations? Imagination primed by expectation? We do not know. What we do know is this: the house affects people. Perhaps it is the architecture itself, the hallways that curve and twist, disorienting your sense of direction, the staircases that rise and fall at odd intervals, throwing off your balance, the doors that open onto unexpected spaces, a closet where a room should be, a wall where a hallway should continue. The human brain relies on patterns, on predictability, on spaces that make sense. The Winchester house offers none of that. It keeps you off balance, uncertain, alert. Your senses heighten. Your imagination fills in gaps, and suddenly a draft becomes a presence. A creak becomes a footstep. Silence becomes something watching. The house does not need to be haunted to feel haunted. It just needs to be what it is, a labyrinth designed intentionally or not to unsettle. But there is something else. Walk through the mansion on a quiet afternoon when the tour groups have thinned, when the only sound is your own footsteps on hardwood, and you feel it. Not fear, not dread, loneliness. Deep, aching, pervasive loneliness. It hangs in the air like dust. It soaks into the walls. It fills the empty rooms. So many rooms, elaborately built, beautifully crafted, and utterly unused. Bedrooms where no one slept, parlors where no guests gathered, a ballroom where no one danced. Sarah built for a family she did not have, for a life that was taken from her, and that absence is palpable. The preservationists who maintain the house today understand this. They work carefully to keep the mansion as close to Sarah's vision as possible. They repair damage from earthquakes. They replace rotting wood, restore stained glass, maintain the gardens. But they do not finish what Sarah left unfinished. The rooms that were incomplete when she died remain incomplete. The construction materials she ordered, still stacked in storage, stay untouched. Because finishing the house would betray its purpose. The house was never meant to be finished. It was meant to continue, to grow, to change. Stopping it, completing it, would kill what makes it alive. And the house is alive in its way. Not with ghosts, not with spirits, but with the memory of motion, the echo of hammers that rang for 38 years. The residue of obsession and grief and desperate, relentless purpose. The tour guides feel it. The maintenance staff feel it. The visitors feel it. A sense that the house is not quite empty, not quite still, as if it is waiting for something. For Sarah to return with new plans, for the workers to arrive at dawn, for the hammers to start again, for the building to resume. But it never will. The construction ended September 5th, 1922, the morning after Sarah's death. And yet, the house does not feel abandoned. It feels paused, as if at any moment a door might open. A light might flicker on in a distant wing. Footsteps might echo down a hallway. Perhaps that is the real haunting. Not ghosts, not spirits, not the supernatural, but the persistence of presence. The way a person's life, lived intensely enough, leaves an imprint that does not fade. Sarah Winchester devoted 38 years to this house. She poured everything she had into these walls. And that kind of devotion does not simply vanish. It lingers. Walk through the Winchester Mystery House today, and you are walking through memory. Not the memory of ghosts, but the memory of a woman who refused to stop building, who turned grief into architecture, and who left behind a question that may never be answered. Was she trying to escape something? Or was she trying to build something worth staying for? Or was she trying to build something worth staying for? That question haunts more than the house itself. It haunts everyone who learned Sarah's story, because we recognize something in it, something uncomfortably familiar. The need to keep moving, to keep building, to fill the emptiness with activity, with purpose, with anything that makes the silence less suffocating. Sarah Winchester is not as strange as the legends suggest. She is just more visible. We all build labyrinths, not with wood and glass perhaps, but with work that never ends, projects that expand endlessly. Relationships we complicate, goals that shift the moment we approach them. We tell ourselves we are making progress, that we are building towards something, that one day when everything is complete, we will finally rest. But completion never comes. There is always another room to add, another staircase to climb, another door to open, and maybe that is not madness. Maybe that is just being human. The Winchester Mystery House became famous because it made Sarah's interior life exterior. It turned her grief into something you could walk through, her loneliness into hallways, her need for control into architectural precision. Most people hide these things, bury them, manage them privately. Sarah built them, and in doing so, she created something that speaks to a universal truth. We are all trying to make sense of loss, all trying to build meaning from chaos, all trying to find purpose when everything we loved is gone. She just did it more literally than most. But here is what the house teaches. If you are willing to listen, unfinished things are not failures. The staircases that lead nowhere are not mistakes. They are explorations, attempts, the willingness to try something even if it does not work. The doors that open onto walls are not proof of madness. They are evidence that plans change, that what seemed right yesterday may not fit today. That adaptation is survival. The hallways that curve back on themselves are the reality of grief, that healing is not linear, that you will revisit the same pain again and again, and that is okay. The house was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be ongoing. And perhaps that is Sarah's real legacy. Not the haunted mansion, not the ghost stories, not the spectacle, but the permission to build imperfectly, to create without knowing the end, to pour your life into something that will never be finished and call that enough, because it is enough. Sarah Winchester lived 82 years. She survived losses that would have destroyed many people. She took her grief and transformed it into one of the most remarkable structures in America. She employed hundreds of workers for decades, providing stable income and fair treatment. She donated thousands to charity, quietly without recognition. She created beauty that still takes people's breath away a century later. She built something that endures. Is that madness, or is that legacy? The house stands today not as a warning, but as a testament to resilience, to creativity, to the stubborn human refusal to give up, even when giving up would be easier. Millions have visited since 1923. They come for the mystery, the ghosts, the strangeness. But they leave thinking about their own labyrinths, their own unfinished projects, their own grief, hidden or expressed, shaping the architecture of their lives. They leave wondering, what am I building, and why? Sarah Winchester never explained herself, never justified the house, never defended her choices. She simply built. And when she died, she left the explanation to us. We can call it madness, we can call it obsession, or we can call it what it actually was. A woman doing the best she could with unbearable pain. Using the tools she had, money, time, vision, to create something that mattered to her. Building not to escape death, but to fill life. And maybe that is the most haunting thing of all. Not that the house is strange, but that it is achingly, devastatingly familiar. Because we have all walked hallways that lead nowhere. We have all opened doors onto walls. We have all built labyrinths from our grief. Sarah just had the courage, or the compulsion, to make hers visible. Sarah just had the courage, or the compulsion, to make hers visible. And what remains a century after her death is not what anyone expected. The ghosts, if they ever existed, have gone quiet. The seance room sits empty, roped off for tourists. The cold spots have been measured, analyzed, explained away by drafts and temperature differentials. The mystery has been studied, documented, cataloged, but the house endures. Stand outside the Winchester mansion today, and you will see something different than Sarah saw. The neighborhoods have pressed close. Modern homes line the streets where there were once open fields. Traffic hums on nearby highways. The city has grown up around the mansion, swallowing the isolation Sarah once depended on. But the house itself remains largely unchanged. The same sprawling structure, the same Victorian towers, the same impossible architecture. 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 fireplaces. The staircases still lead nowhere. The doors still open onto walls. The house still confuses, still unsettles, still asks questions it will not answer. But something has changed. The house is no longer alone. Where Sarah walked in silence, tourists now crowd. Where workers once hammered in isolation, tour guides now explain and interpret. Where grief once echoed through empty halls, laughter and conversation now fill the space. The house has become public, shared, and in becoming a museum, it has been preserved, protected, allowed to continue existing when it could have easily been demolished, subdivided, lost to time. The restoration work continues. Every year, specialists examine the structure, checking for earthquake damage, wood rot, foundation issues. They repair what can be repaired, stabilize what can be stabilized. But they are careful, always careful not to finish anything Sarah left incomplete. The preservationists understand. The house's value is not in its perfection. It is in its imperfection, its incompleteness, its refusal to conform to expectations. Finishing the house would make it less valuable, not more. So they maintain it as it is, a work in progress that will never progress further, a monument to the unfinished. And the visitors keep coming. Over 12 million people have toured the Winchester Mystery House since 1923. 12 million pairs of feet walking the floors Sarah walked. 12 million hands touching the railings she touched. Each person arrives with their own expectations. Some want scares. Some want history. Some want to solve the mystery once and for all. Most leave with more questions than they came with, but they also leave with a story. They tell their friends, their families. They post photos, write reviews, record videos. They keep Sarah's story alive, even if they do not fully understand it, because understanding may not be the point. Sarah Winchester built a house that cannot be fully understood, that resists simple explanations, that offers a dozen interpretations and validates none of them completely. And maybe that is exactly what she intended. Not to leave answers, but to leave questions. Not to provide closure, but to create openness. Not to finish something, but to begin something that would outlast her. What remains is not just a house. It is a conversation. One that has been happening for over a century and shows no sign of ending. Historians debate her motivations. Psychologists analyze her mental state. Architects study her methods. Spiritualists claim her presence. Skeptics dismiss the legends. And all of them, in their own ways, are right and wrong. Because Sarah was complex, contradictory, human. She was grieving and practical, obsessed and generous, isolated and deeply connected to the workers who helped her build. She was not one thing. She was many things, just like the house. Sarah Winchester died in 1922, but she left it something behind that refuses to die. Not a ghost, not a curse, but a house that holds space for mystery itself. A house that says you do not need to understand everything. You do not need to finish everything. You do not need to make sense of your grief. You just need to keep building. Imperfectly. Incompletely. Honestly. The hammers stopped in 1922, but the story continues. And the house, sprawling, impossible, beautiful, still stands, still waits, still holds the memory of a woman who turned her grief into architecture. What would we build if we had the courage? That question echoes through every hallway, every staircase, every door that opens onto nothing, because the Winchester Mystery House is not really about Sarah Winchester anymore. It has become larger than her, larger than the grief that built it, larger than any single explanation. It has become a symbol of what exactly depends on who you ask. To some, it is a warning, a cautionary tale about what happens when grief goes unchecked, when wealth enables obsession, when isolation festers into something destructive. They look at the house and see waste, millions of dollars spent on construction that served no practical purpose. 38 years of labor producing a structure that cannot be lived in comfortably, cannot be navigated logically, cannot be finished. They see a woman who needed help, but built walls instead. And perhaps they are not entirely wrong. To others, it is inspiration. They see a woman who refused to surrender to despair, who took her pain and transformed it into something tangible, who created beauty and mystery and wonder from the darkest period of her life. They look at the stained glass windows and see resilience, at the intricate woodwork and see determination, at the sprawling, impossible structure and see the stubborn human will to create meaning from chaos. They see someone who kept going when stopping would have been easier, and perhaps they are not entirely wrong either. To the spiritualists, it remains a genuine mystery. They point to the experiences visitors still report, the cold spots, the strange sounds, the sense of being watched. They note the number 13 repeated throughout, the seance room, Sarah's nightly rituals. They believe the house is genuinely haunted, that Sarah's spirit remains, walking halls she can never leave, that the spirits she feared or invited still linger in the shadows. They conduct investigations with electromagnetic sensors and thermal cameras, searching for proof of what they already believe. And who can say they are wrong? Science explains much, but not everything. And in a house this strange, built by a woman this driven, who is to say what is possible? But perhaps the house is asking a different question entirely. Not, was Sarah mad or sane? Not, are there ghosts or not? But, what do you do when the world takes everything from you? Because that is the heart of Sarah's story. She lost her child. She lost her husband. She lost the family she thought she would have, the future she had imagined. And then she was handed a fortune. More money than she could ever spend, built on a product designed to kill. What do you do with that? How do you move forward when there is nothing left to move toward? Sarah's answer was, Nama, you build. You create something. Anything. You fill the void with motion, with purpose, with the physical act of making. You do not wait for the grief to pass. You do not expect healing to arrive on its own. You build through it, around it, with it. And maybe that is the lesson. Not that Sarah's specific choice and ever-expanding mansion was right or healthy or admirable, but that the impulse behind it was deeply, recognizably human. The need to do something when doing nothing feels impossible. The need to create when everything you loved has been destroyed. The need to keep moving because stopping means feeling everything you have been running from. We all have our Winchester houses, projects we cannot finish, relationships we keep complicating, goals that shift the moment we reach them. We call them ambitions, passions, careers, hobbies. But sometimes they are grief in disguise. Sometimes we are building labyrinths to trap our own pain, to confuse our own memories, to keep ourselves too busy to feel what we cannot bear to feel. The Winchester Mystery House does not judge this. It simply shows it, makes it visible, turns the interior landscape of loss into something you can walk through, touch, experience. And in doing so, it offers a strange kind of comfort. Because if Sarah Winchester, with all her wealth, her intelligence, her resources, struggled to make sense of grief, struggled to move forward, struggled to build something coherent from the broken pieces of her life, then maybe it is okay that we struggle too. Maybe it is okay that our own projects are unfinished, our own paths twisted, our own attempts at meaning imperfect and incomplete. Maybe we are all building mystery houses, and maybe that is not failure. Maybe that is just life. So the question the house asks is not, why did Sarah build this? The question is, what are you building? And why? And what would happen if you stopped? These are uncomfortable questions, questions most of us avoid. But the Winchester Mystery House does not let you avoid them. It forces you to confront the reality of unfinished things, of paths that lead nowhere, of beauty built from pain. It forces you to ask, what am I running from? And more importantly, what am I running toward? Sarah Winchester never answered these questions. She simply kept building until she could not build anymore, and left behind a house that asks them still. A house that refuses easy answers. A house that reflects whatever truth you bring to it. A house that says you do not need to have it all figured out. You just need to keep building, even if it leads nowhere, even if no one understands, even if you are building alone.